Sorry about that. Our Zoom's been having some recording issues lately. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Holly Andrews. I am the office manager here at IECRM, and I have a privilege of facilitating this call today. Today, we will be joined by Katie Shope, who is our marketing manager, who will be sharing with us all of the highlights about what it means to submit a nomination for the Summit Awards and why it's good for your company to do that. Once Katie's done presenting, though, we are going to be joined by Patrick Dalen, who is with Fisher Phillips, and he is going to be sharing with us all the things we need to know about prevailing wage. So with that, Katie, I'm going to have you go ahead and start sharing with us why people should be submitting their nominations for the Summit Awards.
Thank you, Holly. So this year marks our 17th annual Summit Awards. It's a great opportunity to get your projects in the forefront and set your company aside or differentiate your company. It's a great way to get recognition and to boost your team's morale. And let's see. Let me just pull up my notes here. So winning a Summit Award can provide valuable recognition and can get your company some publicity. This will help build your reputation in the industry and attract new clients. Receiving a Summit Award boosts your credibility. The Summit Awards are judged by a panel of industry experts. And so winning a Summit Award can lend credibility to your company's hard work and expertise. So what you'll receive, winners of the Summit Awards will receive recognition on stage during the event, a personalized award to proudly display, press release to share with local media, a winner badge to promote your win on websites and other digital media. You will receive a special announcement in our e-newsletter that goes out to membership, recognition in the printed year in review annual report, and a special invitation to submit for an IEC National Award. So IECRM is using the same awards platform as IEC National. And so our awards are aligned with the criteria for national awards, making it easier for your company to utilize your submission for a local award to a national award. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay, Holly.
Yes, please do.
Okay. I want to show you the interface of it, where you would apply for an award.
And Katie, just real quickly, what is the link that they would go to?
You could get to the awards platform by typing in iecrm.org/awards. Okay. Are you seeing the Summit Awards?
We are.
Okay, great. So when you go to iecrm.org/awards, you will be taken to a login screen. If you've ever applied for a national award, your password will be the same. So your login information will be the same since we're using the same platform. If you never applied for an award, then you'll go ahead and create a new account, and then it'll take you to this screen here where you can enter for an award. So it gives you a little summary about the awards and criteria. The entry deadline is coming up this Monday at 11:59, but don't worry, it's very simple to apply. You'll see the list of award categories. So this is where you want to start. You want to take a look at this list and make note of any category that your company can apply for. Your company can apply for multiple awards in different categories. So take advantage of that. So the Summit Awards doesn't only recognize excellence in electrical construction projects, we also have several awards to recognize individuals. And you'll see the categories here. So once you make note of all the categories that your company can qualify for, you want to go ahead and start entry. And you select that specific category. I'm going to go ahead and select Community Service Award, just to give you an idea how simple it is to apply. So you just put in your company information. And I think I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Katie Shobe, and I'm the marketing manager at IECRM. I've been here for 7 years. So this will be, I believe, my 8th Summit Award because I'm going into 8 years. All right, and then here we are. So each award category gives you an option to print these fields. So you can go ahead and print these and write them out, handwrite them, type them however you want, or you can just simply go right into the platform and start typing, because this platform allows you to save and you can access your award category at a different time. So go ahead and, I'm just going to put in some text here so we can get through these. This says, this Community Service Award, describe how the nominee demonstrates leadership in the community involvement. So the next field is describe the programs and services and the contributions of the individual or company. Then you'll come to a screen where you will have the ability to attach supporting documents or photos. Photos are great. And you even have an option to attach a video, or if you don't have the video, if it's a link on YouTube, you can paste your link right into there. And then it just asks for a little bit of information about whether you're applying for yourself or nominating somebody else. And that's about as simple as it gets.
So Katie, what you're trying to say then is it's not too late for our members to continue to apply for the Summit Awards?
Correct. It is not too late. You have until Monday at 11:59 p.m. So let's see. So that's as simple as that. I didn't say submit, so it still shows my award is in progress. So you want to make sure that when you get to that screen that you want to submit, and that will finalize your submission. So let's see. I'm going to stop sharing. And then I have just a few more notes about to share with you guys about the steps. Just to recap. So first you want to review the award category, select the one you want, take notes on the categories that you can apply for. Second, you want to gather information and documents to support your nomination, and photos, if you can get photos to support. If you're submitting a nomination on behalf of somebody else, I would suggest letting that person know, maybe doing an interview and asking for their input. Let's see. Another helpful tip and trick for you is if you have writer's block, or if you're not sure that you have the time to write about your project or your accomplishment, there are great AI applications that you can access that basically you put in the basic information and it can help you flower it up. So take a look at those. They're becoming very popular. It's AI writing applications. So just Google that. We've experimented recently with ChatGPT, and it's very surprising how knowledgeable these applications can be. So that's a helpful tip if you're having writer's block. Don't feel confident in your time that you have to write about, your accomplishment. Definitely check that out. There's lots of free ones out there. Let's see. And definitely get your submissions in by the deadline. Monday at 11:59. There is a category to recognize everyone within your company. And we are super excited to be hosting the Summit Awards this year at Empower Field at Mile High. I think it's going to be amazing. We've checked out the venue and we're super excited to be there. We have lots of surprises in store for that evening, and we hope to see you all there to support the stars of our industry. Does anybody have any questions about Summit Awards and the process of submitting an award? All right, well, thank
Katie,
you.
I just want to point out that we have awards for industry partners as well as contractors. So if you're an industry partner on the call, there are categories that are there specifically for you. So please be sure to check those out and get your nominations in before Monday at 11:59.
Thank you,
Katie.
Holly.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
So on the call with us today, we're honored to have Patrick Dalen. He is an attorney with Fisher Phillips, and he happens to also be an expert on our topic today. Patrick represents employers in a full range of employment law matters with a particular emphasis on wage and hour issues and government audits and investigations. He is the co-chair of Fisher Phillips' Prevailing Wage Team, and he assists government contractors with compliance obligations under the Davis-Bacon Act, the McNamara-O'Hara Service Contract Act, and state and local prevailing wage laws. He also represents employers in government audits, investigations, and litigation concerning prevailing wage issues. So we're very excited to have Patrick here. He has also been he worked for 12 years with the U.S. Department of Labor in the Office of the Regional Solicitor in both Philadelphia and New York. And he is going to give us some great information because we've been having a lot of questions here at IECRM regarding prevailing wage as it relates to IRA. And so Patrick, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us what we need to know. Appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Holly, and thanks for having me, and thanks for that great introduction. In the world of prevailing wage, I've handled these both when I was at the government, so from the government enforcement side, and I've been handling a good number of prevailing wage matters and investigations as well now with the law firm representing companies in investigations. So I've had the opportunity to see kind of both sides of the coin here, and have had a good opportunity to see where the common, I would say, trip ups are, which I'll mention a few of those today. I think those are the items that you should have at the forefront of your mind when you take on one of these projects. I'll discuss in a second the Inflation Reduction Act specifically, and I'll focus on that mostly. But I think it's helpful to initially just talk about prevailing wage concepts in general. So at the federal level, in the construction space, it's usually the Davis-Bacon Act that applies. You can end up with a Service Contract Act job, but I think that's a small minority. But the principles are mostly the same. And then also, you folks are out in Colorado. I know that the city of Denver has its own prevailing wage law, and that's common with a lot of big cities. So you can also find yourself on a prevailing wage job that's either covered by both Davis-Bacon and your local prevailing wage statute, or you could be on a job that is Denver only prevailing wage, which has a couple of its own wrinkles because the Davis-Bacon wage determination doesn't necessarily apply, but then you have your for instance, the Denver local prevailing wages that would apply. Although that sounds like that could be complicated because there's different overlapping laws, and it does add sometimes administrative complications. The general concepts are the same. So there's always a prevailing hourly wage that's pegged to job categories. So the easiest way to think of it, at the federal level, you'll have a wage determination that's issued by the U.S. Department of Labor for your locality and for your type of construction. And it'll list, a bunch of different job categories in there: carpenter, laborer, iron worker, electricians, with the hourly rate that needs to be paid. And that's the journey worker hourly rate. There's also an hourly health and welfare fringe benefit rate that you either need to pay to the employees or use to purchase health and welfare benefits, things like health insurance, life insurance. You can put it into a retirement account, things along those lines. If you, let's say the fringe rate is $15 an hour, and you buy up $10 an hour worth of benefits, you still need to do something with that other $5 an hour. So that remaining $5, you either have to pay it out to the employee or go buy $5 per hour more worth of benefits. How to calculate benefits at an hourly rate is a tricky subject, and that's kind of an advanced subject, and we won't go into those details. But some employers like to just pay out the fringe in cash to avoid those issues. There's other service providers out there that could help you if you want to purchase benefits, on how to cost it out by hour to make sure you're eating up that whole fringe rate. A very key aspect to make sure you're complying, and this is whether it's Davis-Bacon Service Contract Act, local prevailing wage, it doesn't matter. You want to make sure that your workers are slotted into the right job category. Now, I think most of the companies on this call are electrical contractors, which makes it somewhat easy. I suspect most of the time your employees are going to be slotted as electricians. Sometimes I suppose you may have laborers, so you want to make sure that they're categorized correctly. And then you can have apprentices on the job. Under Davis-Bacon, there isn't a requirement to have apprentices, but under the Inflation Reduction Act, there is a specific requirement to employ apprentices on projects covered by that statute and the tax credits under that statute. It's very important to make sure you slot your workers into the right category. So you do that by, first of all, making sure you have the right wage determination. And that involves two things, really. One, you want to make sure you have the correct locality. So the rates change from, usually a wage determination will be limited to one county. If you get out to more rural areas, they may combine a couple of counties into a wage determination. You want to make sure you have the wage determination from the right locality. So if the project is in Denver, you have the wage determination for Denver, and you have it for the right type of construction. So there's 4 types of construction under Davis-Bacon. There's building, heavy, highway, and residential. And the prevailing wage rates are generally different among those 4. So it's very important to know, if you're doing a project and it's a small building, smaller than 4 stories or smaller, that's going to be all residential. Typically, that's a residential wage determination, and you have to pay the residential prevailing wages. For a larger building, you could be in a building wage determination, and typically those hourly rates are higher. So you should be getting, the way it works is there should be someone in charge, the contracting officer, who issues the contracts that issue, and they should issue a wage determination. And oftentimes they work with the Department of Labor to make sure they're issuing the correct one. And that should flow down to you. Your general contractor, for instance, should make sure you have that. It's set up that it should work that way, and you should be handed the correct one. But sometimes there are issues where contractors don't get the wage determination provided to them, or the person who selects the wage determination could make a mistake. That gets a little complicated if the person issuing it makes a mistake, and it has to be fixed down the road. But at the outset, you want to take a look and just make sure your determination is the right locality, the right type of construction, and you want to make sure you're slotting in workers into the right categories. You also have to make sure you're classifying workers into a category that's listed on the wage determination. So a very common mistake is companies might come in, they'll take a prevailing wage job, and they'll have workers that they may call helpers, for instance. But if a helper isn't listed on the wage determination, you can't categorize them as helpers. You have to slot workers into categories that are listed on that particular wage determination. And there can be differences from one type of construction or one locality to another. There may be job categories included in one that aren't included in the other. So you always have to read it and make sure what categories are available in the wage determination that applies to your project. If you think that there's a category that's missing, but is needed for the job, there is a process called the conformance process where you can request a conformance and ask that a new job category be added. And you want to do that right away. Ultimately, the Department of Labor is going to decide whether they agree that this job category is needed for this type of work or they disagree. If they agree, they'll add it. If they disagree, they'll just say too bad. And you're going to have to figure out where to slot your workers based on what's in the wage determination. Workers working mixed categories of jobs is another issue. So if you have someone who's doing laborer duties on some days, but electrician duties on other days, you can do that. But they put the onus on the employer to carefully track what work is being done on what day or during what week, however you break it up. They put the onus on the employer to properly classify the worker for every hour that they work and keep records of what work is being done at what time. The Department of Labor takes a position if an employer has a worker working across multiple categories but doesn't keep good records of what work is being done when. They'll usually say, if they come in and do an investigation, that you need to pay that worker at the highest rate applicable for all hours worked. So if you have someone working as an electrician sometimes, a laborer sometimes, and maybe you had them do if they did some work that qualifies as, say, like carpentry work other times, usually the highest rate of those three will be electricians in most localities. If you don't keep detailed records of what hours are worked in what category, the Department of Labor will usually say you just have to pay all the hours at electrician's hours, the highest rate. I guess let's get into the specifics of the Inflation Reduction Act. So the Inflation Reduction Act has two major components with regards to the prevailing wage issues. One is for a number of green energy tax credits and one deduction. In order for the taxpayer on the project, so that would usually be the developer or the owner of the property, for them to get the tax credit that's offered by this law, there's two main components that apply to you guys. One is you have to pay the Davis-Bacon prevailing wages to your workers, and all workers on the job have to be paid the Davis-Bacon prevailing wages. So if you subcontract out a piece of your work to someone else, you're going to be expected to make sure that they understand their obligation, that they have to pay Davis-Bacon rates as well. And the second component is the apprenticeship component. So this is somewhat different from regular Davis-Bacon land, where they don't require you necessarily to have apprentices. If you do use apprentices, there's rules that apply. They don't necessarily require it. Here, there's a requirement that you use apprentices if you have 4 or more, either by the Department of Labor or your state agency, depending, but it should be set forth in your apprenticeship program what the ratio is. But also there's a requirement that a certain minimum number of hours of all of the hours that your workers work on the project, a minimum number of those are worked by apprentices, excuse me. And that it depends on when the project begins. It's an increasing percentage. It starts at 10%, but in the next 2 or 3 years, it goes up, I think, from 10 to 12.5, and then from 12.5 to 15% for projects that begin after 2023. So in order for the taxpayer to get the credit, you have to pay the prevailing wages, and you have to use apprentices that both meet the journey worker to apprentice ratio and also work that minimum threshold of hours for all the hours worked on the project. For apprentices, you can pay them a reduced rate. It's a percentage of the journey worker rate, and that's usually controlled by the program that you're getting your apprentices from, the apprentice program that you participate in. So both the Davis-Bacon Act and this Inflation Reduction Act statute requires that you get your apprentices from what they call the bona fide apprentice program. So that's a program that's either registered with the USDOL or registered with a state agency if your state has an agency that's been certified by the USDOL. And I believe, this organization here, it's my understanding you do have an approved bona fide apprentice program. So that kind of makes it easy. I've been hearing from a number of contractors in different places, their biggest problem is they don't know where to get apprentices from. So it's nice that you guys have that set up, because that's actually been one of the biggest problems I've been hearing. It should be set forth in the program, the percentages, and I believe it is, Holly, that you break down the percentages based on hours that the apprentice worked. So you have your levels. So you're going to want to pay it in accordance with. So if the apprentice has put in between 2,000 to 3,000 hours of on the job training, there's a ratio set forth for the hourly rate. You compute that, so you get the Davis-Bacon wage determination, whatever the hourly rate is for electricians. I was trying to look it up this morning on sam.gov, but the government's website is down. So let me just take a guess and say it's $35 an hour. You multiply that rate by the $35 an hour, and that's what you pay your apprentice for the hourly wage. For the fringe benefit piece, generally you still have to pay the full fringe benefit rate. You can't multiply that by the percentage unless your particular program permits that, or the Department of Labor has specifically permitted it for your project or for your wage determination. But unless it's permitted by your program or has been specifically permitted by the government, even though you reduce the hourly rate for the apprentice, you still have to pay the full fringe benefit rate.
Thank you so much for that. Quick question on that. So,
Yep.
Right, as an apprenticeship sponsor or an OA program sponsor, right? When it comes to that percentage and breakdown, right? So there's a scope of work for your journey level worker, and then your minimum wages per right the state or city has. When it comes to the fringe on a sponsor side, as long as we are providing those percentages in that calculation base, how does the sponsor get involved with that fringe allocation? Like you said, it gets a little tricky on how different contractors make that spread, right? What are we responsible for as an OA sponsor to communicate to them? Just that percentage, or is there anything when it comes to the fringe that we have to assist in the allocation of?
So apprenticeship programs, one of the core things they usually include is that rate, which applies to the hourly wage. For the fringe, I haven't seen your program, but you could have rules on the fringe. I think it's generally the case that there's not, and the fringe that the contractor needs to pay is just set forth in that Davis-Bacon wage determination. And it's up to the contractor to decide. And different contractors can do it differently. Some may pay it out every single dollar of that fringe. They may just pay it out directly to the employees. Others will go by different mixes of benefits, and it's really the contractor's prerogative how they want to handle that. As the apprentice apprenticeship program sponsor, you don't have to, well, you don't dictate how they spend that money. You know, as an organization, could you assist in some way in helping people to find benefits? Yes, but there's no requirement to do so.
Thank you so much. That answered my question. Really appreciate it.
And if anyone else has questions as we go along, feel free to just jump in.
Yeah, this is Marty. I'm with Duro Electric and we work with IEC right now. When we look at a program such as IEC's program and registration, we're trying to determine for apprentices. We have the wage scale and the percent, and we understand that payout for the wages. But for the fringes, we're trying to interpret the documentation from IEC on, do we have to pay, let's say we have an apprentice at a 35% level. Are we required obligation wise to pay 100% of the fringes to that apprentice? Or is the obligation only 35% of that fringe rate in the prevailing wage sheet? And that's really where we're struggling right now and working with the IC organization to understand that interpretation and what we should be paying.
Yeah, if the apprenticeship program, the written program is silent on fringe benefits, the apprentice needs to be paid 100% of the listed fringe rate.
Okay.
So you reduce the hourly rate by the percentage, but you don't reduce the fringe rate by the percentage.
So it really depends on the written program of the, let's say the apprenticeship sponsor program with IEC and kind of what that states and how we interpret that and what we pay.
Yeah, if there can be in the program a provision for a reduced fringe rate, like a percentage reduction for apprentices. If that's been approved, if it's in an approved program, then you can pay the reduction. But if it doesn't say anything, if it's silent, you have to pay the full fringe.
Thank you for that clarity. Appreciate it.
One important thing on the apprentice requirement, there's a good faith exception. So if you're a contractor, you get one of these projects, it's covered by the Inflation Reduction Act credits. The developer, the owner wants to get the credits. So you have to go obtain the necessary number of apprentices to meet the ratio. If you contact a qualified apprentice program, and the program either doesn't respond within 5 days, or they tell you, we just don't have enough apprentices to fill your needs, you can move forward without having the necessary number of apprentices to meet the ratio. That's a good faith effort, safe harbor that's built into the act. But you have to make the effort. You have to contact a program. So likely this program, say for whatever reason, there's a very high demand. They don't have enough apprentices. They tell you that in writing. You want to keep that record. Because if down the road there's a question, how come you didn't have the sufficient number of apprentices? Well, we sent a request and we either didn't get a response in 5 days, or we were told that there aren't enough apprentices on hand to meet our needs. Fine, you can move forward and not meet that apprentice requirement, but certainly document and save the record that you made that good faith effort and through no fault of your own just couldn't get the sufficient number of apprentices. And I know solar is probably a big concern for you folks. There's not going to be, so if you're on a solar farm construction project or a solar installation project, if it's say residential or something, they don't include in the Davis-Bacon wage determinations like a solar tech or solar installation tech on the wage determinations. And they actually put out some guidance verbally in a presentation recently the U.S. Department of Labor did on this issue. They have no plan to create a job category for solar installation tech. What they say is it's their understanding that these types of projects include work that falls into various categories. There's electrical work that's electricians. There's there might be some work that's iron worker work, setting up those metal frames that the panels get installed on. There might be some operating engineer work. There might be some carpenter work. They say you just have to split it out and categorize people into the existing kind of traditional job classification categories. You can't just call someone solar installation tech. That's not going to be under wage determination. You're going to have to be intentional about thinking what work falls into the electrician's bucket, what work falls into the carpenter's bucket, and so on. Break it up and keep track of everyone's hours with precision. A good practice there. What happens is if there's investigations and you have people working in across multiple job duties, the DOL will come in and they'll interview some of your employees. They may be more cursory interviews versus more detailed interviews. And what they look at is the touchstone essentially is what's the nature of the work being performed and what are the tools that the worker is using. So if they hear a worker's using like Klein pliers, they say that's electrical work. They run to that's electrical work, even though it could be like low end work. So you as the contractor want to be, again, intentional and exercise a lot of supervision with regards to what are these workers doing, what tools are they using, and you want to make sure people stay in their lane. It could be a problem. You could have employees who are like real go-getters, right? And they finish their work and they want to go help someone else with their work. And these could be great employees, but now they're bouncing around from job categories, and that could get you into some trouble action on prevailing wages. Because, you know, if they're picking up like Klein pliers, even though you employ them as labor to help somebody else out, DOL could come in, for instance, you know, they'll oftentimes argue that person should be paid as an electrician because they're using the tools of an electrician. One helpful practice is to either on a weekly or even better daily basis, you know, you have some type of supervisor who makes a record of the work each person did each day. Describe the nature of the work, tools used, and then have each employee sign off on it on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Yes, I agree. This accurately reflects the work I did each day. So if it becomes a question down the road, you know, oftentimes employees and supervisors can be getting interviewed about what happened at what point in time on a project, a year down the road, 2 years down the road. It's hard to remember. If it's all blended together in a blender, you know, it's an egg that can't be unscrambled at that point in time. DOL will usually just say you have to pay them for the highest job category. So a really good practice would be to keep that daily, you know, maybe weekly, but you know, best practice daily record signed by the employee of what they did on each day of the project and what tools they use. There's also certain record keeping requirements under the Inflation Reduction Act. So under Davis-Bacon, there's record keeping requirements. You have to keep records of hours worked and pay certified payrolls for 3 years. Under the Inflation Reduction Act, you have to include, because this is a tax act, it's a Department of Treasury Act, you have to include, you have to keep records of all documents supporting the taxpayer's claim for the credit. So in your case, all documents that record that you complied with the prevailing wage and the apprentice requirements. And it's kind of open-ended. It says you have to keep the records for a period of time. Let me see what it's a tricky question here. Let me find it here. There's no set time on it. It's for any period of time where there might be a question about the application of the credit. So how you work that out with the taxpayer, you know, they may want to, at the end of the project, take a copy of your records so they can keep them. But how exactly that works out remains to be seen. But you do have to make and keep records showing that for each day of the project, you had the required apprentice to journey worker ratio. You have to keep records showing that you met the minimum number of hours for required apprentices on the project. You have to keep records showing that each apprentice on the project was enrolled in a bona fide apprentice program. So, you know, if you're getting your apprentices from the IEC, you have to keep records showing that the apprentice came through that program and remained in that program. They weren't kicked out or anything for violating any rules. You have to keep records showing the apprentice's year and level, right? Because that matches up with the percentage of the wage rate. So you have to keep consistent records of where each apprentice is at each point in time, which is going to justify the percentage you apply to the wage rate. And also records documenting the apprentice was paid appropriately in accordance with that level. And then, of course, if you are claiming the good faith effort exception that we discussed, you couldn't get apprentices despite your best efforts. You have to keep records that you made that request and that it either wasn't responded to or was responded to, and the organization didn't have the necessary number of apprentices to apply. There's prevailing wage record keeping requirements, but I think we discussed those already. You know, keep records of hours worked, pay, and records of what work each worker performed in each job category. I think that's a good framework of the basics. I don't know if anyone has any questions. It might be a good time for that.
And this is Marty again. I have a question just to clarify the overtime rules for apprentices. If we're in a program whereby we're paying apprentices or requiring overtime, how does that overtime calculation work? We understand, working with Denver auditors right now, that overtime on journeyman needs to pay the full journeyman prevailing wage rate plus the fringes, less that employee fringes, and we're trying to understand the apprentice requirements and the overtime requirements within Davis-Bacon.
Mm-hmm. So at the federal level, I won't speak on the specific mechanics for Denver to the extent they might have different rules. I'd have to look into those, but at the federal level, journeymen and apprentices have to be paid overtime at 1.5 times their regular rate, which is usually their hourly rate. So for journeymen, it's going to be that full rate listed in the wage determination. For apprentices, it'll be whatever the percentage rate is their hourly rate, their regular rate. Regular rates can get complicated if you're paying bonuses and things like that. That affects the calculation too. But let's assume you're not doing that. You pay 1/2 times their hourly rate. So for an apprentice, that's going to be that reduced rate. You also include you have to pay the fringe rate for overtime hours. You don't have to include the fringe rate in the regular rate computation, if that makes sense. But for hour 42 on the project, you still need to pay that hourly fringe rate.
So the inclusion of fringes as part of that overtime calculation, not as part of the 1.5 times, but is definitely included. So if we have an apprentice at 35% level, kind of entry level, we're paying them 1.5 times generally their base rate, not the 35% rate. We pay the 1.5 times, and then we also add on the fringe benefits. Do we need to do that at full value of 100% of the fringe benefits, or just that 35% level again, if the program allows it?
So if the program provides for a reduction in the fringe for apprentices, you would pay whatever they're due pursuant to the program. So if there's an approved reduction to the fringe rate, you just keep paying that for every hour. So whatever you pay for hour 39, you pay for hour 42.
Okay.
I think that answers the question.
Yeah, that does.
Is there another piece of the question that I missed?
No, that's good. Thank you. I appreciate that clarity. Again, as we're looking at this IEC program in particular, since everybody on this call is a part of the IEC program, in their standards, they do state that apprentices shall be paid a progressively increasing schedule of wages and fringe benefits during their apprenticeship, based upon the acquisition of increased scale. I guess that hourly wage scale. So I think with that language built into the program as we see it, that would definitely mean that for apprentices, we can pay a percent of the fringes, not 100% of the fringes. So,
I wouldn't want to comment on it unless I saw it and saw the surrounding language.
Sure.
I think it's at least a maybe based on what you just read, but
Sure.
I would want to look at it more closely before
Okay.
I offered a specific opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Marty, thanks for asking the question. And I'm curious, to the attorney, I apologize, I missed your first name.
Oh, Patrick, nice to meet you, David.
Patrick. Good to see you. Patrick, I'm curious, in your experience, what percentage of OA programs do pay at 100%, do pay fringes at 100%? And what percent pay it at the same percentage as they do the wage? Because I think Marty brings up a great point.
I don't want to hazard a guess as to percentage. In my experience, I think it's more common that may not be a detail that's included in the plan. But I don't want to say that's representative, like nationwide of how things work necessarily. It's just going to depend from program to program. But if you have something that's been specifically provided for in your program that allows a reduction in the fringe in an improved program, then you can go ahead and do that.
Okay. Is that, with the well, yeah, you have to look at the language before making a full determination.
Yeah, I wouldn't, yeah, I would need to know more.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other questions for Patrick this morning?
Yes, this is Johnny Guyton from Duro as well. So Patrick, I definitely understand that you need to look at that language specifically before you can make a determination on whether or not our program allows for that. But in the case that, let's say a program doesn't have that language specified in their guidelines, what is the process for maybe amending that? Is it pretty straightforward, or is there a plethora of processes that they need to go through in order to make an amendment?
It would be similar to the process you went through to get it approved in the first place. And I'm not sure, I know you mentioned it in an email, Holly, but whether it's currently a state approved program or a DOL approved program, but I think the process is generally the same. You would just make your revisions and submit it to them for their review and approval. There's no, I couldn't give you a hard and fast rule on how quickly they respond. But I think at least at the federal level, they're fairly responsive. And they would let you know whether that's approved or not.
Great.
Thank you, Patrick. I was just curious. I appreciate it.
Yep, you're welcome.
Any other questions for Patrick this morning? For those of you who don't know that are on the call, we do have here at IECRM, we have our compliance manager and our compliance coordinator who are both on the call today, Terry Reynolds. Terry, you want to wave to everyone so they know who you are? She is the one who does the OA registration within the program, and Mike Davis is our newest team member and has joined us in the compliance department. So those would be your two go-to people when it comes to the OA registration here at IECRM. Any questions pertaining to OA can be directed to Terry or to Paul, and we will do our best to get those answers for you. One last chance. Does anyone have any more questions for Patrick?
Patrick, there's so many questions.
And we could have a conversation offline too with any follow-up questions.
My question is, I get a lot of calls regarding prevailing wage. How do they do it? I, as a compliance manager, am only involved in the standards. I've never, worked on prevailing wage jobs. I've never been that contractor. So what is my position as far as the question regarding the prevailing wage?
What is your position with regards to, are you asking whether you can provide advice or?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's up to you and your organization. Whether you're comfortable providing that advice. This is maybe a question we can discuss in more detail offline. But you're not necessarily obligated to. But we could discuss the specifics of that. I think that's a longer conversation.
Great. Thank you, Patrick.
Well, there is a lot of information for us all to glean from this conversation today. I will check in with Patrick to see if there's anything we can send out as far as checklist or handouts to get those out to everyone on the call today. We will have a recap that will be going out later today as well. Patrick, thank you so much for taking time to join us today and answer these tough questions. They are coming in more regularly, especially as we are coming in with the IRA right now and those requirements and all the different components that go into prevailing wage jobs. So we appreciate your time. Thank you for answering our questions and maybe raising some more for us that we need to figure out still. So we look forward to continuing the conversation with you at another time.
Well, thanks for having me, and I hope it was helpful. And certainly anyone who has questions, you can reach out to me as well. And
Thank
perhaps
you,
you can send my contact information.
We'll get that out to everyone as well.
All right. Thank you,
Thanks.
folks. Nice meeting everyone.
Thank you.
Great day.